You there, fellow engineer, are you tired of having your building sat by those sneaky spies?
Yeah!
Are you tired of soldiers and demos ruining your day?
Heck yes!
Do you hate when those pesky Ubers begin to push into your base? Fret no more, we have the solution for all of your troubles. The one, the only, the Pybro. That's right, with a Pybro at your side you won't have to tackle your problems alone. Spies won't be around for long with a Pybro burning them. Soldiers and demos become mere pests with a Pybro, as they'll happily reflect them away from your buildings. Uber pushers, not a problem. Your friendly Pybro will push them away and sacrifice themselves to protect your buildings. Wait, I didn't agree to this. So what are you waiting for? Get your very own Pybro today. As you could tell from that very real infomercial, we'll be discussing the more defensive side of the Pyro today, typically referred to as the Pybro. The Pybro term is typically used for pyros who assist their fellow engineers from having their nests taken out by spies and other threats. Pybros are usually easy to find as they'll be wielding the almighty homewrecker. This bad boy is most likely the main reason why the term exists and helped birth this playstyle to begin with. This weapon is pretty much essential to be classified as a good Pybro, so make sure you have this melee equipped if nothing else. But why are they so important? Surely the multiple turtling engineers will be more than enough to withstand the onslaught of the enemy team, right? While that may work sometimes, a Pybro assisting them helps more than some may realise. While the title is usually simplified down to helping engineers, Pybros have to do much more than that, as your typical Pybro will have a lot of work to do in order to keep enemies out. In 90% of situations, a Pybro will be on the defense, assisting a team with fending off anyone trying to capture the intelligence or deny enemies trying to push the cart or capture the control point. You may however find a couple on the offense, depending on the game mode, but for the most part you'll see them getting comfy inside your base. While on defense, you'll be assisting your fellow Texans with their buildings, keeping them alive for as long as possible. Your main traits as a Pybro are to be patient and be alert as an enemy threat may appear at any time. Those enemy threats may change depending on location, but while on the defense you'll run into the previously mentioned big three. The spy is the number one threat to keep an eye out for regardless of how you play Pyro, but if you're helping out with keeping a sentry nest alive, you'll especially want to focus on finding and eradicating this menace. Spies are sneaky and you won't see them a lot, which is why spy checking is crucial in helping out. On game modes like Capture the Flag and King of the Hill, your engineers will typically stay in one spot. Think of the courtyard or intelligence room on 2.4 as examples. If your team is doing a good job of keeping enemies from taking intel or points, you better prepare for a spy to show their ugly mug sooner or later. As a Pybro, you have two main objectives to help deny a spy. Find them to help engineers pinpoint the problem, and to remove sappers to keep buildings up and running. And to be honest, this is pretty easy to do. Spy checking as Pyro is pretty much the easiest way to do so for any class, with the visible fire consuming a supposed teammate when you check them. Remember to do this for everyone. Going back to the courtyard example, an engineer will be typically situated on the upper level. As a Pybro, you should check your surroundings every now and again. For this example, this means that you should check outside your spawn and the area just near the entrance of your base. Make sure to do this at random intervals and not to do it too frequently, as more experienced spies will pick up on these patterns and go in for the kill when you're not watching. Doing it randomly will also help catch a spy off guard and likely catch them in the act. It should be noted that you should not overextend and try to catch a spy who has successfully escaped. At that point you've already won and defended your base, and if you extend too much then another spy could swoop in and take out your engineer. This should be noted in general, as running off could lead to your death and in turn your teammates' death. As long as you manage to catch them before they get to any building, you won't even need to bring your homewrecker out. But let's just say they managed to get close before you could catch them. They'll obviously try and sap the buildings and take out the engineer if possible. Your first course of action is to try and stop the engineer from getting stabbed. If the spy goes for the buildings first though, don't remove the sapper. The engineer can do that himself, you go for the spy. Why? Well, that's because the spy can put on infinite sappers, so if you're both trying to remove a sapper, you're wasting time. Engineers already have the ability to get the sappers off, so as the Pybro, burn the spy to make them run away, or the better outcome, kill them in order to stop them from spamming sappers. Once the spy is taken out of the question, you can then deal with the sappers. This is especially important for situations where the engineer has died or is away from the buildings. So remember, spy first, sapper second. Pybro should focus on getting rid of the spy whether they're heading towards the engineer or already too close, and then worry about sappers on buildings. There will be situations where the spy will run away immediately after, in which case removing sappers will become the most important thing to do. But in most situations, your focus should be removing the spy from the equation first. Next on the list is reflecting any incoming projectiles away from your engineer's buildings. This is somewhat more difficult to do due to your limited use of the air blast before running out of ammo. However, if a friendly engineer has built a dispenser, then the issue is easily manageable. Your flamethrower of choice is pretty crucial due to the difference in number of air blasts and timing. Typically the stock is your best choice, but the degreaser isn't too bad for Pybros either. As long as you understand how many uses it has before travelling back to a dispenser, then most choices should be alright. Now, soldiers' rockets and Demo Man's grenade pills shouldn't be a problem with the right timing. I've been over air blasting these enough times at this point, so I won't bore you going through it again. Reflecting away from the buildings and preferably back at the enemy players to help boost your team's defences. The biggest problem that some don't really think about too often is the Demo Man's sticky bombs. While a Pybro can reflect them while they're still travelling in the air, once they stick to a surface they're frustratingly hard to move away. The worst part is that only about 2 to 3 well placed stickies can destroy an engineer's sentry gun. So what can we do in this situation? Well, you may not like it, but it's the best solution. Yeah, I know, scorch shot bad, no skill needed, blah blah blah. But as a Pybro, I would say this is the one situation where the scorch shot is valid and is pretty much the best way of removing stickies from being a threat. A lot of the time you won't have much of a chance to get them out of harm's way, and the shotgun's random spread can really mess you up, so the scorch shot's sticky destroying ability is the absolute best way to keep them from being a problem. Now there is always the chance that the demo will explode the one they shot straight away rather than stack them, which in this case you'll want to try and reflect them away like any other projectile. Once you have a chance to attack the soldier or demo, your best choice is to chip away with a shotgun or use the scorch shot to get some afterburn damage on them to hopefully get them to retreat. Just like the spy, if they're already too far away to deal with efficiently, leave them. It's always better for you to stay alive to keep assisting your engineer. Our final big threat as a Pybro to our fellow Engies is the dreaded Uber push. Anyone watching this already knows what an Uber entails and should also know that Pyro is really the only class that can somewhat affect an Uber once it's activated. This is where the air blast comes into play once again, so your choice is pretty crucial in more than one area. Regardless of who is being Ubered, your job is to push them back for as long as possible. Your objective is to make them waste as much time as possible, of course, but if you can distract them and disrupt their push long enough so that they can't take down a sentry gun, but that's an even bigger win. This is about the only area for Pybro's duty where dying has a high chance of happening, seeing as how you'll be rushing at 2 invincible enemies. If you come out the other side alive, great. If you don't, then you died keeping the enemy Uber far away for as long as possible, which is a noble act for a Pybro to do. Your sacrifice overall is much better compared to the engineer in his buildings, so dying shouldn't be frowned upon for the most part. Note that if you're fighting an Ubered enemy that has projectiles, you may want to take a shot of reflecting those away instead of the enemies, as if the projectiles don't hit, then the enemy Uber push is pretty much less effective overall. And if it's possible at all, try pushing the medic away from his partner. This not only stops the Uber from being as useful, you can possibly get him away from his partner long enough to stop him from being invincible, and your team can come to assist in taking them down. Essentially, wasting as much time as possible regardless of what action you take is a good way to make sure any Uber push is as useless as possible. Those 3 will be the biggest risks towards your engineer's nest and what you should focus on when there's a lot going on. Of course, it should be noted that more than one big risk may occur at once, so choosing what you do depends on what is required of you first. Not to mention that these tasks won't be the only thing a Pybro will be doing. That's right, remember when I said you might see a Pybro when on offense? Well, that's partially true, and here's what I mean. There are other responsibilities that a Pyro has that can be deemed as Pybro worthy no matter what kind of Pyro you play as. You may not realise it at first, but one such responsibility is extinguishing teammates. If you see a member of your team running back while aflame, you'll want to press that mouse 2 button to prevent them from dying. Plus, that 20 health bonus nowadays makes it a no-brainer. I've seen too many Pyros not help out teammates with a simple click of a button, so please, if you're one of these Pyros, extinguish your team so they can at least help you and everyone else a little longer. Another simple task you can do to help out is lighting huntsman arrows on fire. This simply takes one click of your mouse once again and can assist with your sniper in dealing more damage. It's not really an important task that you need to focus on, but it's always a nice gesture to help out your team in any way you can. Finally, spy checking in general is another good way to be a Pybro while outside of normal circumstances. This is particularly good when your medic is roaming around healing others, as a spy could drop their Uber at any point. So checking your surroundings with your flamethrower will stop a surprise attack on your team and help keep your medic's uber charge up as much as possible. Those are essentially your duties as a Pybro, all condensed down. Support your engineers by tackling spies, projectiles and ubers, and helping out your team in general. Your situation will of course change depending on what is the most important task to perform, but Pybros will typically be seen around an engineer, so focus on them first. Overall though, being a Pybro requires you to be a team player. A lot of Pyros seem to only worry about getting kills and not bothering to support their team. And while Pybros typically support their engineers the most, small gestures like extinguishing go a long way in helping out your team. Now that we know what we need to do though, what are the best weapons to be the most optimal Pybro? As I said earlier, your choice of primary will play a factor in how well you perform certain actions. You won't really need too many air blasts when dealing with spies, but when reflecting projectiles or pushing an uber away, the amount of times you can do it will be crucial. This is why I would recommend the stock flamethrower over everything else. Good damage, good afterburn damage, and with the most cost efficient air blast overall, you'd be hard pressed to find a better choice. A close second would be the degreaser for its switch speed and relatively good air blast cost compared to stock, but it pales in comparison to the utility of stock in such a defensive role. Offense wise it could be better, though this will apply mainly when playing other playstyles like combo pyro instead. For the secondary, I suppose it's more dependent on what you're more comfortable with overall. If you're good with a shotgun, then stock or the reserve shooter will be good for consistent shots compared to the panic attack, which is still a good choice to be honest, though only really exceeds the other two in close quarters. If you're good with a flare gun, then the normal flare, detonator or scorch shot are all valid choices, though if you remember me talking about the sticky bombs earlier, you'll know that the absolute best choice for your secondary is the scorch shot overall. Shooting it near the stickies will delete them instantly, and if enemies are peeking your engineer's sentry gun, then a direct hit will knock them back and may hopefully splash damage anyone nearby. There's no question, this is the playstyle where the scorch shot actually takes some kind of skill to use effectively, though that's not saying much. Finally, our melees are pretty cut and dry as well. In more offensive positions, I'd recommend the power jack solely due to its utility. In defensive situations, the speed boost could still be useful to run to and from your engineer when spy checking. However, let's be real for a second. I think regardless of how you look at things, the home wrecker is the absolute best choice for most situations as a Pybro. While there's a damage penalty against other players, the bonus damage against buildings may be useful if you're pushing towards an enemy sentry nest on offense. Of course, being a Pybro, the most useful feature is deleting sappers in one hit. Removing the spy out of the equation is your top priority of course, but being the only class apart from the engineer himself that can deny spies sapping buildings is super satisfying. One final alternative you could consider instead of the home wrecker is the neon annihilator. If your engineer is set up in an area with water or close by to it, then this could be a great weapon to use instead. With critical hits on wet players will ensure that you can do more damage to enemies if they dare get close to your team's buildings, and can still remove sappers from those buildings but with an extra hit in order to do so. People always argue that the neon annihilator's second swing makes it terrible compared to the home wrecker, but just think. How many swings does it take the engineer to remove a sapper? Exactly, 2, the same as the Neon Annihilator, so I don't think this negates its usefulness as a Pybro weapon, as this still makes it a safe choice doing a tad more damage against enemies regardless of state. So if you enjoy playing maps that have water on them, or if you have teammates who can assist in making the enemies wet, then the Neon Annihilator is a great alternative choice. Pybros make for a great defensive boost, as Pyro in general tends to lead to working better as a defense class. As much of a jack of all trades as Pyro is, they typically work better when supporting teammates, and being a Pybro regardless of the situation is a perfect way to show that off. While I myself love to run rampant in an offensive manner most of the time, it's hard to deny that Pybros have strong willpower to not do the same and stick by their teammates, and for that I give my respect to them. The amount of patience that they must have to not rush in and just attack people is commendable, and I've learnt with my time playing as Pybro that it takes a lot of skill that a normal Pyro requires, but amplified a lot more. While on offense you'll run into situations I've already mentioned, however not as much as a Pyro in the long run. Of course, Ubers and spies will come and go around you, but while on defense these tend to be more common due to the enemy team pushing and trying to complete an objective. This more aggressive onslaught is common no matter what class you are on defense, however the Pybro really has so many jobs to tackle that it's kind of ridiculous when they can stay on top of it, especially on game modes like Payload. For me, a Pybro's role has been super underappreciated and may have been for some of you as well. Whichever way you look at it, Pyros certainly fit a support role more than what the game labels them as. For better or for worse, it brings forward how useful many of the weapons Pyro has when used in a defensive manner, but also the usefulness Pyro brings to the team as a whole. Medic and Engineer will always trump Pyro support wise, but Pybros are always there to lend a hand when you're on fire, or if you need an arrow lit, or to help push back an Uber from the enemy team. And honestly, it's one of the many reasons that makes Pyro so special to play for me. This has been your Fem Pyro enthusiast BonOakley signing out. See you guys in the next one.